Now, Prince William, it has broken his silence on the rift with his brother, Prince Harry.
Your arguments with your brother became physical.
He was shouting at me, I was shouting back at him, and he snapped. And he pushed me to the floor.
He knocked you over.
He knocked me over. I landed on the dog bowl.
Nothing about the document looked explosive at first. No shocking headline, no rule broken in black ink, no crime, no confession, no dramatic reveal. And yet, the moment it was quietly reviewed, everything changed. A single piece of paper, routine, official, forgettable to anyone else, became the spark for one of the deepest fractures the royal family had seen in years. What made this situation so dangerous wasn't what the document said, but what it suggested. Not lies, not proof, just enough ambiguity to make people question motives, intentions, and trust. And in a family where perception is everything, that was enough. Because once doubt enters the room, it doesn't need evidence to stay. It feeds on silence, on history, on old wounds that never quite healed. This wasn't about a child's birth being invalid. It wasn't about rules being broken. It was about something far more unsettling. The realization that even the most ordinary paperwork could reopen scars that never closed. And the moment that realization landed, there was no way to put it back.
Stress around family side of things, that does overwhelm me quite a bit.
He didn't say Harry's name, but he certainly seemed to allude to that rift.
For most families, a birth certificate is a formality, a record, a box to check before life moves on. But inside the royal world, paperwork is power. Every word, every omission, every technical choice becomes part of the historical record. That's why this document mattered long before anyone questioned it. It wasn't scandalous on its face. It followed protocol, it passed legal standards, but it existed in that dangerous gray zone, technically sound, emotionally volatile. The language was precise without being complete. The structure answered some questions while quietly avoiding others. Nothing false, nothing provably wrong. Just enough space left open for interpretation. And in an institution trained to control narratives, open space is risky. This wasn't about legality. It was about future vulnerability. Because once the press senses uncertainty, it fills the gaps aggressively.
And he had a few issues, and he was coming for my wife. She wasn't there at the time.
What looked like harmless discretion to one person looked like strategic vagueness to another. And that difference in interpretation is what transformed a routine record into a catalyst. Not because it demanded answers, but because it invited suspicion. William didn't approach the document as a skeptic. He approached it as a custodian. Someone raised to believe that protecting the institution meant anticipating problems before they surfaced. To him, the issue wasn't intent, it was exposure. He had seen how small inconsistencies turned into full-blown narratives once the media got involved.
What I also thought was interesting is he's not dwelling on resentment. He's not bitter. If you sort of imagine Harry doing this sort of interview, he'd be very sort of narky and bitter, whereas William's like...
He understood that silence doesn't stop speculation, it accelerates it. From his perspective, the wording wasn't dangerous because it was wrong, but because it was interpretable. And interpretation is where reputations go to DMN. But here's where the conflict began. William wasn't just reviewing a file, he was reviewing his brother's choices. And even when framed as concern, scrutiny feels different when it comes from family. What William believed was preventative care landed as suspicion. He thought he was closing doors before the press could force them open. Harry heard something else entirely, that trust was conditional and that even fatherhood hadn't earned immunity from doubt. For Harry, the conversation was never about formatting or wording. It was about history repeating itself. His entire life had been defined by being questioned, corrected, and publicly doubted. Every mistake magnified. Every emotion dissected. So when concerns were raised about his son's paperwork, even carefully, even calmly, it hit a nerve that had never stopped aching. He didn't hear, "Let's clarify." He heard, "Something doesn't add up." And when that implication touches your child, it stops being theoretical. It becomes personal. To Harry, the idea that his desire for privacy could be reframed as concealment felt like betrayal. He believed he had followed guidance, trusted the process, tried to do things right while protecting his family from the same machinery that had chewed him up. So when the institution came knocking again, this time through his own brother, it confirmed his worst fear, that no amount of distance would ever be enough, that even fatherhood wouldn't shield him from suspicion. Meghan's role in this story is often reduced to intent, as if silence automatically equals strategy. But silence, for her, had become survival. She had learned the hard way that explaining yourself doesn't always clarify things. Sometimes it just gives critics more material. In the months surrounding the birth, everything felt compressed. Pressure, expectation, recovery, scrutiny. Decisions were made quickly, guided by advisors, shaped by a desire to keep something, anything, sacred. The language on the paperwork didn't feel deceptive in the moment. It felt cautious, protective. But silence doesn't exist in a vacuum. In a family trained to communicate through protocol and precedent, restraint can look like resistance. And once that perception takes hold, intentions stop mattering. Her quiet became interpreted as withholding, her boundaries became barriers. And without a counter-narrative, others filled in the blanks for her. Not with facts, but with assumptions. The call itself wasn't explosive. No shouting, no ultimatums. That's what made it worse. William spoke carefully, choosing language that sounded reasonable, almost gentle, the way people do when they're trying not to trigger defensiveness. But caution can feel cold when you're already braced for impact. The word irregularities landed like a quiet accusation, even if it wasn't meant that way. Harry didn't hear concern. He heard doubt, not just about a form, but about judgment, competence, and intention. As the conversation unfolded, it became clear they weren't even talking about the same problem. William was focused on future headlines, on how gaps get weaponized once the press notices them. Harry was focused on the present, on his child, his family, and the familiar feeling of being examined under a microscope he never asked for. Every sentence widened the gap. What was meant to calm only inflamed, and somewhere between reassurance and frustration, the unthinkable happened. The conversation stopped being about clarification and started being about control. The most revealing moment didn't come from what was said, but from a single word that lingered too long in the air. We. William kept using it. We should address this. We should be careful. We should make sure this stands up. To him, it meant family, unity, shared responsibility. To Harry, it sounded like oversight, like being folded back into a system he had deliberately stepped away from. That word carried history, of being managed, corrected, reminded of his place. And suddenly, the subtext was louder than the conversation itself. Harry realized this wasn't a discussion between equals. It was a review, a check. And the moment he said it, that there was no we anymore, something irreversible happened. Not a fight, a fracture. The kind that doesn't announce itself with drama, but settles in quietly and reshapes everything that comes after. Here's the part that confuses outsiders the most. Nothing illegal was uncovered. No official correction was issued. No scandal ever formally broke. On paper, the situation went nowhere. And yet, emotionally, it went everywhere. Because families don't operate on legal thresholds. They operate on trust. And once trust is questioned, even indirectly, it doesn't snap back into place. The document stayed exactly as it was. Filed, archived, forgotten by the system, but not by the people involved. The damage didn't come from exposure. It came from implication, from the knowledge that a line had been crossed, not by accusation, but by doubt. What kind that lingers because it's never fully expressed, never fully resolved. And in that silence, resentment grew roots. This wasn't an isolated misunderstanding. It became a template. After this, every interaction carried residue. Every gesture felt loaded. Attempts at reconciliation stalled not because of public drama, but because something fundamental had shifted privately. Harry leaned harder into protecting his immediate family, building walls where he once built bridges. William leaned deeper into duty, convincing himself that leadership requires distance. Both believed they were doing the right thing. Both felt misunderstood. And the institution, as it often does, kept moving forward without stopping to heal what had been broken behind the scenes. What began as a question about wording became a defining moment, not because of what it revealed, but because of what it confirmed. That even blood doesn't always outrank structure, that love doesn't automatically override legacy. In the end, the tragedy of this story isn't hidden secrets or dramatic revelations. It's that nothing was ever definitively resolved. No answers arrived to cleanly separate right from wrong, just a lingering sense that asking the question may have caused more harm than leaving it alone. The birth certificate didn't divide the family. Interpretation did. Fear did. History did. And perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is this: everyone involved probably acted in good faith. Yet good faith wasn't enough. Because in families shaped by power, tradition, and trauma, even honesty can feel like an attack. And even silence can sound like guilt. The paper was just paper, but the wall it helped build was real. And walls like that don't come down easily, especially when no one can agree on who put the first stone in place.